The gut locally near salt marsh and mud flats. We don't actually own this bit. Salt marsh, which is basically the ban from this section here. Flats, it's all managed by the Royal Society for Protection of Birds as a nature reserve. It's also a Ramsar site. Ramsar is a place in Iran where there was a big confluence of wetlands back in the 70s. They designate a lot of sites around the world that was of international importance to migrating wildfowl. So this is a designated Ramsar site, so it's heavy protection under international law. Home to about 40,000 wintering geese. Along with Findhorn Bay. The issue here in climate change is that the sea levels are rising. So what we're finding is the mud flat and the salt marsh are actually getting bigger. The salt water is coming higher up, starting to hit the edge of the forest. So we did actually have a meeting here with the RSPB's reserve manager a few years ago, and she's thinking in the future that we'll have to, what's happening is you get 40,000-50,000 geese here in the winter, and they roost on the salt marsh. Now the trouble is the mud flat is extending, so as the tide comes further up, the mud will extend, and the salt marsh will extend further inland. At the moment, because the forest is there, the amount of ground they push to reduce the impact. So they're actually looking for us to fell the edge of the forest at some point in the future. It's not an official request, but they're indicating that it might have to happen. So that the salt marsh has got room to extend and give the geese enough room to roost. So it's directly because of climate change. So it's a resilience issue that maybe you won't get many forests you ever manage or look at. It's just again because of Culbin's unique position. The other thing we could talk about while we're here, as you can see, there's a lot of conifer regrowth on the dunes. This is a Culbin bar, and the one on the left is known as the Nairn bar. That extends right almost right the way back to Nairn Beach. The gap there where the mud flats are inside every cut the under our management, we own that section of sand dune there. RSPB own that piece. And what we've done in the past and what they're doing regularly is cutting the conifer off, taking the regen off the sand dunes. Because sand dunes is a very, mobile sand dunes is a very rare habitat. So obviously, if you have trees on sand dunes, it stabilises them, so it changes them, and then with the needle drop, it introduces nutrients, and you get it's a succession idea where eventually everything will become a forest. But Nature Scot, which is the Scottish Government's nature organisation, conservation body, they would like us to remove all the conifer off the dunes and have a mobile dune system. There has been talk in the past of us doing a large-scale dune restoration in Culbin, but the scale is very large, and that's scared a few of our organised people at a senior level in our organisation. The problem is, the whole reason that we planted trees in Culbin was to stabilise the dunes, to stop the sand moving inland. If we then remove a huge proportion of the trees to create mobile dunes, we can't actually model, because of climate change, because of more extreme weather events, we don't know where the sand's going to go. In Findhorn village, at the edge of Findhorn Bay, which we'll go to in a little while, the location of Findhorn has had to move at various times over the last few hundred years because of drifting sand, causing the River Findhorn to change its course. Therefore, they have to move the village. So, to suddenly create 800 hectares of mobile sand dune, we have no idea what the sand's going to do.
You see that along Spey Bay as well, you know, that just the sandbank shifting, don't you?
If you go to places like Spey Bay and the mouth of the Spey, I've gone there and seen the river block simply because a storm was washed a lot of cycling along the entrance. So climate's a huge issue at this level. So marsh increase and also benefit the geese. And the sand dunes, they would clear the sand dunes to recreate a very rare mobile dune habitat. The risk of the sand is going to cause some of the work we can't control, and cause problems for our neighbours. So it's quite a lot of issues. We obviously, as a government department, we have a duty towards increasing biodiversity, maintaining and hopefully increasing biodiversity on the land. But there's checks and balances we have to think about because of the impact of something, a major restoration project, sand dune restoration project we have. There's a smaller one at Lossy, it's about 50 hectares. We may do that as a trial. And I know our colleagues in the North region, based in Goldsby, they've already carried out some sand dune restoration on the forest of Moor, near Tay, which is another forest park in the sand dune. And they've gone, how you do it, you basically just bring in excavators and you just clean up the vegetation on the projects, you just scrape it and put it in the rails down, and obviously you have to maintain it like that. So,
Have you seen any effect on as this the salt marsh extends and it becomes more saline? Do you see any impact on the tree health itself? Or?
there's a section we'll go to next where there's a really obvious, that's behind the beach, which is a section near Buffy Mob, where we have got tree death because of the tides coming further in. Here at the moment we're not too bad, but it's only a matter of time. But you definitely can see that when the tides come in, it's coming further. So it's going to become a big issue from our point of view.
Yeah, I guess kind of got rough estimates of how far it could go up in the next 20, 30 years maybe,
I've got no figures to hand at all. There's one or two sectors, because you can see obviously it'll go towards the edge of the dunes
Yeah.
at some point. There's very little between that and the edge of the dunes. One or two places there's gaps, and you're thinking, well, it could go further in. Because to get to the next stop, you'll notice the road goes through a dune system. The trees go up on a dune on either side. We cut a bit through the dunes at some point to put a road in. Of course, that's just lowered the level of the land. So you're thinking, well, if it creeps up over the beach, it could go that way and get further in. So it'd be useful to get some models of what the sand would do. So that we don't really know, because like everywhere else in the world, the weather's getting more unpredictable. We're getting events that we just wouldn't have had normally. I mean, we had some really high winds the end of last week, and that's unusual for September. I lost the top of the tree from my garden. I think the trouble with the climate change is because it's problems, but it's so damn unpredictable. It's really hard. One of this, we've got forest research, they're modelling for temperatures. It's telling us that the northeast of Scotland's going to get drier summers, higher temperatures. We're going to start suffering. We've got south-facing slopes, conifer crops. We're going to be getting drought issues. You think in Scotland it's enormous unheard of, but we've already got drought crack in spruce forests in places like Lashindarroch near Hidley, in the middle of Aberdeenshire. So that's a reality now. So you've got to be thinking now if you're planting, if you've got a nice, well-drained south-facing slope, you want to be thinking about what you're doing on the slope, because if you put spruces over that, you're going to get drought issues, you're going to get drought crack, you may even lose the case. And it's becoming a huge issue.
And then I guess the prone to other things. Yeah.
And again, if your trees are under stress because of drought, something else comes in, a pathogen comes in, again the chances of survival is slim. So I think the trouble with climate change, it's not just one issue, it's coming together in lots of issues, coming in from all angles. So it's just this, having to be really, really vigilant and monitor, just keep looking and keep monitoring for thinking about. The challenge is thinking what's going to happen in 50 to 100 years' time. Because what you plant now, it's going to be around in 50 to 100 years' time and you don't know what's coming, so you have to really think. And that's what I'm talking about, not being all your expert, that's trying to diversify your species as much as you can. It's funny because from different cultural ideas. We had the German forester working with us for a while. So when he was planning, doing management plans for forest, he was thinking of far more species than we would normally do. We're just thinking of a handful.
Yeah, I was going to say, are there any others you're thinking about diversifying into or trying out? Or
That's planners.
yeah.
I was Joachim.
Joachim, yeah, Joachim's with us now,
Yeah,
obviously,
he
yeah.
used
So
to work with us.
yeah,
And you notice with his plans, he was suddenly, the diversity of species he was thinking of was much greater. Far more use of fur, different species of fur. We don't have a huge amount of fur in this part of the world.
yeah, it's a dominant in Europe.
Yeah,
the fur systems.
So that's what he was thinking of. He's in those sorts of soils, it's a climate. Why not?
Yeah.
And it just wasn't. We seem to be a little bit restricted sometimes in our outlook in the UK in terms of species. It's spruce or nothing, almost. Going back to the 70s and 60s. So again, it's just diversification as much as possible. I think is the key, because you just don't know what species you're going to get affected next. So,
Just go on there. Alan, if you could explain what these balls are.
yeah, because it's a bit of a guess. Does anybody know? I do bring people down here some students who can try to plant the mud flat, and that's dead trees.
I see planting squads out there.
These were put in 1940 during World War II. There was a theory that Germany, having taken Norway, would invade from Norway into the northeast of Scotland because it was so poorly protected, far away from where most troops were, that kind of thing. Also, we've got used to have two Royal Air bases on the coast here. So the theory was they could land gliders on the mudflat, take the RAF bases and fly in more troops, and then capture some of the ports and be able to bring in more troops and weapons that way. So these are anti-glider poles. You'll have seen them in photographs of Normandy and the D-Day landings. The Germans were exactly the same in Normandy. Key objectives were put up. Very often they did put a lot of wire between them as well. So the idea is basically you try and land a glider, you'll smash it on landing. So that's what these are there for. So basically they're herring barrels filled with rocks, and they just slotted the pole in them and sunk them into the run.
And who's the main threat now?
Sorry?
Who's the main threat now?
Who knows?
The Russians, maybe.
Russians.
Probably Boris.
Yeah. You don't want him parachuting in here.
Yeah. So they've just been left since World War II. They are actually scheduled monument. They do have protection.
Oh.
Yeah, they're a scheduled monument, but they're just going to rot away at some point in the future. They'll disappear.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting one. But there's quite a lot. We have quite a lot of old defence works from World War II, tank traps, gun emplacements, that kind of thing, in some of the forests along the coast. Rosile and Lossy. Lossy's got a whole ream of gun emplacements and things like that that's still there from World War II, and they're all scheduled.
Do you not have a crashed plane here somewhere?
We do.
Yeah.
That was in '46.
Oh, okay.
In 1946, yeah. We do have a crashed plane. I can't remember what it was. I've forgotten what the plane was.
Yeah.
It was a twin-engine bomber
Okay.
on a training flight, just two
Oh,
pilots,
yeah.
and it crashed. I don't know why it crashed. We get a lot of inquiries of people asking to go and see it,
Yeah.
and we pass them to the MOD, because in theory it's the Ministry of Defence's property still. And also two guys died there, so we're a bit sensitive about it. So if anybody comes, we get a lot of aviation enthusiasts want to go visit the site, and we're worried about souvenir hunters.
Right, taking some.
So if we get an inquiry, we just tell them to contact the MOD, because they would need their permission. We know the MOD aren't going to give it.
Do people just go there themselves, just without asking permission? Do you?
People probably do.
Yeah.
There'll be locals who know about it.
Yeah.
It was actually lost. It crashed in 1946, and they lost the wreckage, and then they did some felling in the 80s and found it.
Okay.
So it's been replanted, and it's all grown up round about it again. So there's still parts of the engine in it, the carriage thing.
Yeah.
We also had in the 80s there was a Nimrod anti-submarine aircraft also crashed in the forest as well. Because the Kinloss, what used to be Kinloss Air Base, is just across the bay, and it was on approach, and something went wrong, and they came down in the forest.
Yeah.
So yeah, a few different links. Just makes the forest a bit more interesting. And for interest, that's a holiday cottage. What's called Duck Island. You can only reach it at low tide.
I was going to say, how much people pressure do you get here? Is there any much? Is it too far for people to
It's
come out?
getting worse. The salt marsh is very easily damaged.
Mm.
You can see the wheel ruts. That's somebody driving out to the cottage. The owner's allowed access to it. The salt marsh is very easily damaged, so vehicles, motorcycles, horses cause damage. We have very little interpretation of to tell people. We basically word of mouth. If we see people, we say, well, could you keep up the salt marsh if you can? The trouble is Nairn's getting bigger. There's new housing getting built at this end of Nairn. That's just suddenly going to be hundreds and hundreds more people coming this way, because it's very easy to walk from Nairn right along here. People from the car park don't tend to get this far, not very many of them. The best way to see Culbin is on a bike, because it's so flat. So you'll get a lot of cyclists that come out this way. But in the summer, the majority of people stay around the car park and the tower area. There's a footpath all the way to the tower from the car park. So most of the people stay there. You still get people out here, but the numbers at the moment are limited. But there's more coming. There's more people coming. During the lockdowns, COVID, forests were absolutely locked. We actually shut the car parks.
Okay.
Because we didn't want large numbers of people congregating in one place, so we were told to shut our car parks. People came anyway and just parked beyond the car park, and it caused all sorts of problems. But I was bumping into people in forests all over the place where I'd normally see no one, because they were looking for somewhere else to go. And I think more people got interested in getting out into the forest for fresh air, exercise, just getting in touch with nature. So what we're noticing is there's more people coming to the forest, and that's just going to put pressure on this.
Yeah.
And we've got an area of lichens, I'll show you later on, where we've cleared the trees off it because the trees were shading the lichens out. So we've taken all the trees off. The trouble is, it seems to be people just say, well, there's a bit of open space, I'm going to go across it. And that's the last thing we really want. So there's all sorts of issues trying to manage. I mean, then we still manage it as a commercial forest. We produce thousands of tons of timber out here every year.
Is there any way of going to the government and basically saying that people can't walk on here?
Under the law in Scotland at the moment, there's no way we can do that. We'd have to ask for it. One of our head ecologists, a guy called Kenny Cotland, he was talking about Glenmore Forest down near Rathie Moor. Now that's one of the refuges for capercaillie, which is a woodland grouse, very rare in the UK, extremely rare in the UK. And they seem to be expanding there. What they're noticing is that part of the country is getting so popular with tourists because it's putting more and more pressure on the birds. What they've noticed is they GPS collared some birds to see what part of the forest they were using, and then they compared it to people's downloads on Strava. So if you go mountain biking or running or hiking, you upload your route, goes straight to Strava, and what they're noticing is people are not sticking to the tracks anymore. In the past they used to stick to the tracks, and that still left a lot of forest for the birds to use. But now because the forest is getting so busy, people want to go off the tracks. So these Strava routes are now going everywhere, and what you find is the area the birds are using is getting smaller and smaller and smaller all the time. So it's a huge issue, but because in Scotland you have this open access code, you can basically go wherever you want. There are certain restrictions.
Nice camping.
Basically, you can wild camp anywhere you like. And Kenny was talking about radio tracking a capercaillie at 3 in the morning in the summer, and coming against a bunch of guys around the campfire drinking beer in the middle of nowhere. So the birds really don't have a chance. There was some research done that where there's screening next to a path or a track, the birds will use all that ground all the way up to the edge. If there's no screening and people can see right through, they won't use at least 100 metres away from the path. So that then, if you think about the number of tracks in a lot of the recreational forests, that's a huge amount of forest that the birds simply won't use because they're so easily disturbed. So it's starting to become a huge issue. I mean, when you capercaillie, we're talking in hundreds of birds. They're not in thousands. The funny thing is they're expanding on Speyside. They're actually increasing in number down there. The trouble is, as they expand in their area and start to spread out, they're going to encounter more and more people.
Yeah.
So it's a huge, huge issue. I know a colleague of mine was in France a few years ago in the Vosges Mountains where they have cattle Cayley, and what they do during the breeding season is they shut all trails.
Yeah.
And if you're caught in there, they'll fine you on the spot.
I know lots of people, they walk dogs as well, and the dogs obviously go further in and find them out, yeah.
Yeah. So you know, if, I do sometimes think we don't really take conservation too seriously enough. Because everybody says, well, I have this right to walk my dog, or I have my right to do this.
And they're actually right. Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about it. What we need to do in this, well, certainly in this spot, we need to have more interpretation, and it's the old education idea. We'll just have to educate them and just say, listen, there's always be something more.
Yeah.
I mean, the big issue is illegal motorbikes, and
Do you think,
motorbikes just destroy this.
do you know, there's generally a pretty good reception from the public when they're asked not to do something?
Majority of people are fine. A lot of people are fine. But there's always a minority who will not
Yeah.
listen. Who think they can do it their way. At the end of the day, if someone's on a motorbike,
How are you going to catch them?
you're not going to catch them.
Yeah.
We do have an ongoing agreement with the police that we report any illegal motorbikes or off-roaders to them, but they don't have the resources.
No.
They don't react. They'll note it, and if they think they're getting a lot, they'll maybe come down and do a few controls. But they simply don't have the resources to deal with it. They've got more serious matters to deal with. So it's
And I doubt they're afraid much of the punishment.
I'm not allowed to carry a sidearm, so
Yeah.
unfortunately.
No tranquilizer
Sometimes
darts.
you feel
or
that way
anything.
with the way forward, but
Capture them for
it's not like
research.
the US, you know. Their federal agencies all get to carry a gun. Maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good thing.
It's up centre posts.
But I think education. I think we need to get kids when they're young
Yeah.
and educate them about it.
Primary school. And that.
There is an issue. I mean, every year we get Elgin Academy students,
Mm-hmm.
15, 16-year-olds, in here doing biology, and they do transects and monitoring and things like this, getting them used to scientific study of the natural world. And the last time they were in just before COVID, last summer before 2019, and the teacher asked me to talk to them about careers and environment and how to get into it.
Mhm.
And there was 30 of them. And I asked, well, who wants to work in environment? And one lad put his hand up, who immediately got pilloried by his friends.
Yeah.
He thought that was Jesse.
You
know.
care. Boo.
Yeah, wasn't butch enough going into work in the environment. And he was the only one that was interested.
Yeah.
The rest of them just didn't
think-
care. And that was at the time when there was all the school strikes, Greta Thunberg and all that, and there was all these school strikes across
Yeah.
the UK
Yeah.
as well. And the teacher says, well, you won't find any from the Elgin Academy going to strike the climate.
Yeah.
There just seems to be certain sectors just aren't interested. But you've got to get them when they're young.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get them
Yeah.
interested. It's a huge
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah.
I don't know what you do. I just don't know. That's one thing I can think of.
I think if you were to ask adults nowadays whether they'd be interested in it, there'd be quite a few hands going off.
Yeah.
Change your way of thinking, obviously, from when you come to when you're growing up. But,
So it's, I think it's, I mean, hopefully it's getting the idea of working in an environment's getting more popular.
I think so.
It's, unless well, none of them are coming from Elgin. But it's,
maybe that one word.
not that school, but it was funny because with all the climate strikes were going on, and teachers saying, "No, this lot won't be there." Not the slightest bit interest.
Yeah.
You know, more interested in looking at something on their phone.
Tablets, yeah.
Okay.